Welcome, friends, to Beyond the Crucible, the podcast that dares to talk about setback and failure, but not so we can commiserate. It's so we can elevate. I'm Gary Schneeberger, the co-host of the show, and our mission today is to give you the hope that your crucible experiences, those traumas and tragedies you faced or may be facing right now, don't define you. They refine you. They did not happen to you. They happened for you. And I don't know many people who know that better than the founder of Beyond the Crucible, the host of this program, and my friend, Warwick Fairfax. Warwick, this is going to be a good one based on your most recent blog at beyondthecrucible.com. But I know this subject is very close to your heart, and I'm looking forward to exploring it with you here.
Absolutely, Gary. This should be a fun and hopefully interesting conversation.
Well, okay, hopefully, he said. Let's see if we can make I guarantee you, listeners, that we're going to do our best to make this interesting. And I think Warwick's done a great job. It is, as I said, based on his most recent blog at beyondthecrucible.com, which is called How to Build a Great Team. And there's some reasons why, as we talk about it, why this is the subject Warwick picked. And I think as we talk about them, you'll get some real insights into why that is. And the reason that this blog emanated from a recent Beyond the Crucible team meeting that we all had in Savannah, Georgia. It was, as Warwick says in the blog, it was one of, if not the most productive team meetings we've had. And we've had several over the years. And our mission, just so you know, our mission was to chart the future course of Beyond the Crucible over the next 12 to 18 months. And Warwick came back from that meeting, 3 days, and really, well, you'll hear it here. And I'll ask you the question, Warwick. You indicate in your blog that the meeting was very productive, perhaps the most productive meeting we've ever had. Why is that? Why was that meeting so productive?
I think the things that really come to mind are there was this climate of trust and vulnerability, mutual respect. There was a sense of enthusiasm, a sense of just mutual commitment to the mission at hand, the mission of Beyond the Crucible and the task ahead. But there was just this climate of anticipation, enthusiasm, trust, where people could just talk freely and offer ideas and joke. And there wasn't really any tension. Sometimes you're in team meetings and people have this sense of, I just so don't want to be here. How did I get roped into this? I'm just going to sit here around the table and say nothing, or, just try to keep my head down and avoid incoming fire. And we've all been in meetings which are very different and just not productive. But that was a meeting in Savannah was the opposite of this. There was just this enthusiasm and sense of trust and excitement that, right from the very beginning to the very end. So at a high level, that was certainly some keys to the meeting being so productive in our time in Savannah.
Yeah. And this is somewhat weird for me because we're talking, right? I'm guiding you along in this conversation, hopefully amplifying some points, hopefully making some points. But I'm also, in some sense, right, we're both talking about ourselves in some way. So that'll be interesting as this plays out. But the question you pose in the blog is, how do you assemble a great team and provide an environment to maximize collaboration? The things that you just talked about here, effectiveness and trust. And you reflected on that meeting in Savannah, and you came away with some thoughts. And this will, if you've listened to these conversations when it's Warwick and I talking about his blog, I'm going to alert the only living being in my home office right now is my dog. But I'm going to alert the dog to be ready with some rescue equipment, because I'm going to be shocked when I read how many points are in Warwick's blog. He has 7 points. He has 7 points in his blog, which, as you know, is his number. Every time it's 7 points. And they're good points. I'm not making fun of the points. I'm not even making fun of the fact that there's 7. I'm just pointing out that it's another 7-point blog. So
I don't know why 7. It just, by the time I get to 7, 6 doesn't feel enough. 8 feels too many. I guess I must have 7 things to say about anything in the universe that I have a thought on for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I never have 10 or 5. I only have 7.
That's the zone. So we're going to talk point by point, folks, about every point in his blog. But before we get into that discussion, it's important to note, as Warwick talks about the team, that in the blog at beyondthecrucible.com is a photograph that was taken. It was a selfie that one of the team members took, which became more than a selfie since other people were in it. She was in it, but so were all of us. And Warwick wanted to make sure that folks who read the blog, and we want to make sure that those of you who are listening to this podcast know who the folks are in the photo. So I would, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the photo is going to flash here. There it is. But if you're listening, we encourage you to at least play the start of this on YouTube so you can see it. But here are the folks in that photograph. They are, from left to right, Margaret Hibbard, who is our operations manager at Beyond the Crucible. There is Warwick Fairfax, who is the founder of Beyond the Crucible, and I'll throw in podcast host for Beyond the Crucible. There is Cheryl Farr, the founder and chief strategist at Signal Brand Innovation. And I think I can do this one without looking at my notes to make sure I get the titles right. There's me, Gary Schneeberger, who is the president of a public relations firm called Roar, whose logo is a lion. And I'm also the co-host of this show. So those are the 4. We're kind of like the Beatles, Warwick. There's 4 of us. I hesitate to say, I'm not going to brag on us enough to say we're the Fab 4, but there's 4 of us. So do the math, folks. But let's get into these 7 points, because they are really helpful to you folks as you look at how you build the teams that will help you achieve your life of significance, that will help you craft and execute your vision. And Warwick, the first one of those points is this: pick the right individual team members. Unpack that for folks. Why is that? And not just important, but I notice when you do these blogs, the first point is in many ways the most important point. That seems like that's a really strategic, important point. Why is that so? To pick the right team members?
Yeah, I know it might seem obvious. I mean, obviously you want team members who have diverse skills, who are very good in their particular areas. And we'll get more into unpacking exactly what the right individual team members are. But one of the important things is the team members know their lane. So they know what their skills are, but they also know what their skills are not. And it's that sort of mutual diversity of skills and abilities that can really make the team productive. Now, if you have a team member that might be, great at sales, let's say, but, and again, this wasn't our team, but let's say there's another member who's an accountant or a manufacturing person, the salesperson pretends they know more about manufacturing and operations than the operations and manufacturing person. Some people feel like they're experts at everything, even areas where they have no training, experience, or skills in. And that makes for a very tense, challenging meeting. There's a few things worse than being in a meeting when you're the subject matter expert on A, and other people who you feel are either clueless or not very conversant in your area, and they pretend to lecture you about how it works in your area. It's like, really? That's interesting. Who knew? You know, it's just really, so it's important that people are very skilled and diverse skills, but it's also equally important that they know what their skills are not, because then that sets up a really collaborative environment where people can learn from each other.
Right. And I think what worked in Savannah, speaking as someone who was there, as you said in your blog, one of the things that I noticed that speaks to this issue is that when those experts were talking, when Cheryl, the branding expert, was talking about, just brilliantly, I dubbed her Ms. Revelatory, because like everything that comes out of her mouth is just like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And she's so good at what she does. I find myself in those situations, and broaden this out to you folks as a team member. The way I try to operate in those situations is to listen twice as much as I talk, take in what people are saying, who are the experts in those areas. Knowing my lane for me in that situation means I want to learn what they know, so I can at least, if that lane needs a little assistance, or we want to brainstorm things in that lane, I'm not completely unable to do so. I'm picking up knowledge as I go along. And that's one of the things I think that characterizes our team, and not just our time in Savannah, but in general, is that, we listen to each other, and then we know our lanes, but we then know how to, when brainstormings come up, we can sort of set a pinky toe into the other lane just to kind of help everybody out. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think you offer a very good example. I think this will help listeners to give folks a concrete example of what we mean about this point, about knowing your skills and what they're not. So when Cheryl, who's our chief brand strategist and has had many years, decades experience in brand management, she really is as good as anybody that I've come across in terms of the branding area. So we were looking at our brand at Beyond the Crucible, and how do we make sure that we just refine the brand and make sure that, as we've changed, we were Crucible Leadership at one point. We're now more of a personal development, self-improvement brand, hence Beyond the Crucible. So how do we make sure that everything we do is really on brand? So she has a whole concept and strategy, brand dimensions. There's a whole model that she uses. One of her key points is brands have to be true, meaningful, and different. They've got to be true to who you are as a company. It's got to have a meaningful impact on a target audience, and it's got to be different than the competition.
The point in the meeting in Savannah that leaps to my mind when you say that is when we sort of rejiggered the brand dimensions, and Cheryl led that process, obviously. But we all got to speak into it. And what I loved about that outcome, I loved the process, because we all had a say. We all had some ideas. We bounced ideas off each other well. But at the end of the day, what was created was something that was what you wanted. And to me, that's right. That's the 360 of what makes a good team. You have conversation, everybody gets a say, and then at the end, the leader of the team goes, "Yep, that's what it should be." I think.
And what was wonderful is, by the end of the process, we all collectively agreed those are the new brand dimensions. That is how we're going to flesh out the brand as we move ahead in the next 18 plus months. It made sense to us collectively as, I suppose, the founder of Beyond the Crucible, and in that sense, the leader of the team. It's always nice when people agree.
Right.
That builds unity. It doesn't build a whole lot of unity if the team says, this is the way we should go, and the team leader says, nope, we're going to go in a totally different direction. That's his or her prerogative, but it's not the ideal way to build a great team if you're saying no all the time to people.
Right. But
yeah, so it was great that we all kind of were on the same page. That was wonderful.
As we'll get into, everybody brings something different to a team, and the fact that all those different personalities, all those different experiences, all those different expectations, all those things can then coalesce on one idea and all agree is, and we'll talk more about how that happens. But that to me is one of the beautiful things about what makes a good team. Here's another beautiful thing, folks. Point 2 in Warwick's blog at beyondthecrucible.com about what makes a good team that I think is beautiful. And that's this: choose team members who are secure within themselves. So important. I'll say it twice, even though because it's number 2 and because it's important. Choose team members who are secure within themselves. Explain the importance, the absolute necessity of that work.
It's so important to have people who are secure within themselves. People who are insecure, there's a tendency to want to pull other people down, to belittle, to, I'm feeling bad about myself. Therefore, the only way I can feel good about myself is to pull other people down. They will sometimes have the need to dominate or to prove their own worth. Maybe they feel like they're not recognized within the organization enough, that they feel like they're not important. So they want to feel like they have to make their points, have to make their mark. So insecurity is it's just very destructive for a team. So often we get focused on, let me have people on the team who are the best and the brightest, and they might be bright and well qualified, but they need to be secure within themselves. There's a lot of insecure people out there. We've all often at times in our journeys had moments where we've been insecure, but you want to feel like people who show up at a team meeting, that they know who they are and they're okay with who they are. They're secure within themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the things, generally speaking, that speaks to the level of security team members have is, how do you deal with conflict, right? How do you manage conflict? In other words, there's the one who might bring conflict, who doesn't agree with the point. How does that person convey that? Do they convey that in the sense of maybe arrogance, or do they convey that in the sense of, this is what's best for the team? There's security in how you do that. There's also on the receiving end someone who maybe their idea is it comes under scrutiny in some way. You have to be secure enough, right, to have that happen and not feel destroyed or angry or how dare they, right? There's something to be said, I think, about security and how you deal with conflict. And I would say healthy conflict is what you need. How you do that? I think those two things go hand in hand. Is that a fair assessment?
It surely is. And you've created a great on-ramp to the next point, believe it or not, because that's exactly what point we're going to be talking about here in a second. That's such a great point.
Yeah. See, that's just right. That's what happens when we get in these discussions. We start building bridges to each other and the things that we talk about. So let's get to point 3. Let's unpack a little more what I've been talking about here. And point 3 in this blog is have team members who are respectful. Why, Warwick, is that? I'll ask you this: why is that so important? And as we talk, I think people will benefit from an exploration of why that's somewhat difficult sometimes for teams.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think, Gary, you were just sort of outlining, frankly, some of the reasons of why that's important. And the example you gave, I think, is really important and worth spending some time on. So you spoke about, in any team, we're going to have different experiences and inevitably different perspectives. It will be a pretty boring meeting if everybody says, yep, I agree. I've got nothing else. I agree on everything.
Short, but boring and probably not effective. Yeah.
Exactly. Not effective, not productive. But what's really important is when people have different opinions, do you disagree agreeably? You disagree respectfully, or you ask a question. That's often, an even better way of saying, I hear what you're saying. Help me understand more about that, because I tend to lean to this particular conclusion, but I'd love to understand why you have that thought. Now, that's a very respectful way. It doesn't mean you have to always do it in terms of a question, but that's certainly one method that can be very helpful. But whether you disagree with a question in the form of a question or a statement, you never want to make it personal. You never want to make it, well, Gary, that is the worst idea I think I've heard this millennium. Now, maybe there's a worse idea than that, but it's probably the worst idea I've heard in my whole life. And why are you here anyway? I mean, that's one approach, but it doesn't build a good camaraderie, right? You just rip somebody personally. So just because you may not necessarily agree doesn't mean you're right, doesn't mean they're wrong. It means there's a different perspective. So I think what's helpful is if you explore that respectfully. And I think beyond just what their opinions are, you've got to respect the other team members as human beings. They have different backgrounds, different life experiences. You might have a combination of different backgrounds, introvert, extrovert, and we'll get into this more later, different personalities. But there'll be differences, but you have to respect each other. You've got to be respectful of each other's contributions. You've got to be able to agree or disagree respectfully. And you certainly must not have the attitude that you have to win all the time. Whether you quote unquote win is really irrelevant. You want the organization to win. That's the point. It's not about you as an individual winning. If you as an individual feel like whether I win or lose is the most important thing, then you shouldn't be on the team. You should vote yourself off the island, if you will. If you had any degree of self-knowledge, which you probably wouldn't if you were that insecure, unfortunately, which creates a very difficult dynamic for the team and the team leader. So the bottom line is you have to be respectful of other people, of their opinions, and you cannot feel like you have to win every discussion.
It's a nice bridge to the next point 4 in your blog, How to Build a Great Team at beyondthecrucible.com. Point 4 is this, and you touched on it just a little bit there at the end of your answer, and that is team members must be authentic and, what's the word? Humble. Team members must be authentic and humble. Again, you said at the top, some of this stuff seems self-evident, right? But if it was so self-evident, we wouldn't have the need to talk about it, and we wouldn't have examples of when it doesn't work out. So it's important to reinforce. Why is it so critical team members be humble and authentic?
One of the things that we say a lot, that I say a lot, is that character matters. I have this belief that being the smartest person in the room is overrated. I'd rather have people on my team that were 10, 20% less brilliant, maybe even less qualified, but they have character. I've served on a couple nonprofit boards. I'm blessed that, yes, I have a great education, at least on paper, undergrad at Oxford University in the UK, my MBA from Harvard Business School. The reason I mention that is I don't really care where you went to college, whether you went to an Ivy League, if you got an MBA, if you happen to have one from Harvard Business School or some other Ivy League school. That's not really relevant to me. Yes, I want you to be capable, but more important than being capable, which is obviously important. You can't know nothing and have no capability. I get that. I'm not saying that's not important. But I'd rather somebody with a 10% less capability, let's say, than somebody else, but they had high character. And part of what character includes, from my perspective, is authenticity and humility. And that also comes from respecting other people. That also comes from being secure within yourself. And so if you're humble, you won't need to brag about how smart you are and, all of the wonderful things you've done at the previous organization or the wonderful things you've done at this organization. And you constantly talk about yourself and your achievements and just how stupendous you really are and how everybody should be so grateful that you're on the team. I mean, it just is ridiculous and it gets so old. I mean, people will be like, can you just please stop? I mean, just stop it already. It's just so like nails on a chalkboard for everybody else. So if you want to have a productive meeting, you've got to have team members who are authentic and humble. And authenticity, part of that is, as I write in my book, Crucible Leadership, Embrace Your Trials to Lead a Life of Significance. In the chapter I have on authenticity, there are some people that just put on a mask. And it's a mask of who they want to be seen as. People know who you are. There's no fooling people. Be you. Be secure within yourself. It's okay to be you. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to, put on an act as if you're somebody that's so different. So, humility, authenticity, character, it's just critical to have a productive meeting, and it can turbocharge a meeting. The lack of those qualities can just tank a meeting, can just bring it to a grinding and unproductive and ineffective halt.
Yeah, and can make it hard for a team, right? The team that these folks belong to get anything done that's worthwhile, except maybe arguing. It's so interesting, Warwick, you said when you were answering that question, you grouped together authentic and humble from point 4. You added in respectful from point 3, and you added in secure from point 2. I'm just going to hold this up. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I had circled all of those things on this sheet that I'm working off of, so I could talk about it, because I think these 4 are all related in terms of kind of personal characteristics that one brings to the table. And one of it, I think the headline for these 4 points and those 4 those 4 points and these 4 aspects: security, respect, authenticity, and humility. For me, that shows up as think the best of others, right? Don't impute motive that they're out to get you, or think the best of others. There's plenty of time if they're not up to their best. There's plenty of time for that to sort of wash out. And then also live out the best in yourself. I think if we are on a team and we're doing both of those things, we're assuming the best of others, we're thinking the best of others and their motives, and we're living out the best in us, and our motives are pure. I think that gets to a lot of what you're talking about here, and that really greases the skids for a great team, right?
That's so true, Gary. I mean, another way of putting it is the internal precedes the external. We talk about that a lot on Beyond the Crucible. We often talk about it as like the inner soul work. So, if you want to have a productive meeting, a productive organization, a productive nonprofit, doing that inner soul work of being secure within yourself. We talk about this a lot as you come back from your worst day, which I think we've found on our assessment that everybody's had a worst day. Everybody's had a crucible. That's basically the long and the short of an exhaustive
statistically valid. We know that to be true. Yeah,
exactly. Trial to triumph assessment. So everybody's had a worst day. Everybody's had a crucible. Yes, there'll be some inner work like forgiving, which doesn't necessarily mean condoning, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, coming to terms with who you are and respecting that, being secure, being authentic and humble. All that inner work enables you to have productive meetings, enables you to be a very productive contributor, enables the external, if it's a for-profit organization, the revenue, the profits, the market share. If it's a nonprofit, achieving the goals of helping others in a direct and overt way. The inner work helps to create an environment where you will have a productive meeting and a productive organization. But nobody can do that inner work other than yourself. So frankly, if you're an employer or a team leader, look for people that have done the inner work. It's not about judging other people, but if you want to be productive, and if you're leading a team or organization, you have to be productive. The shareholders, the directors, the contributors to your nonprofit, whatever it is, they demand productivity. That's why they're investing or contributing to that organization. And so for you to be respectful of the shareholders, directors, contributors, of course you've got to be productive, and you want to the best degree possible, achieve your goals and your mission. Well, for that to happen, you got to have the right people. And having people who've done that inner work within themselves, are respectful, are secure, are humble and authentic, that will make it so much easier to get it done.
Yeah, and it's great that you use that phrase, inner work, that we use a lot, because as we now move on in the blog, we're getting to the outer work after that, right? We are now, just to review, we're 4/7 of the way through the blog. Note to you, we're always something sevenths through the blog when we're talking about it, because as we said at the top, Warwick likes to write them with 7 points in them. So, but as we switch to the outer work, yes, yeah, the power of 7. As we switch to the outer work, here's the 5th point in the blog, and that's this: each individual team member must be 100% committed to the vision of the organization, not 97%, not 37%, 36%. Each member must be 100% committed to the vision of the organization. Again, seems self-evident, doesn't show up all the time. So obviously something important to mention. What's so important about that, Warren? To be 100% committed, the whole team.
For you to make maximum contribution as an organization to achieving its mission, every team member must be 100% committed to the vision. What you don't need is people who say, at least within themselves, hey, this is just a paycheck. I don't really care about the mission of the organization, but if they're willing to pay me to do this, sure, I'll do it. I'll show up and kind of contribute if I feel like it, but I could care less about the mission of the organization.
Right.
I mean, why would you hire somebody like that? I think too often it can be error by omission. Okay, I'm going to hire somebody with a good track record that seems to be qualified for this position. Okay, that's step one, but there are about 5 or 6 or maybe 6 other steps. So that, of course, it needs to be 7 steps, as we know.
Yes, indeed.
There's at least 6 other steps. And, one of those steps is clearly you want to feel like if you're interviewing somebody, you want to ask, so what about this, or, what about the mission of this organization really excites you? If you hear crickets, it's not a good sign. Maybe you shouldn't hire them. Maybe they don't know as much about the organization, but they should be able to say something that indicates there's some passion. And over time, in these, critical team meetings, you want people that are 100% sold out to the vision. In the case of Beyond the Crucible, what we believe in terms of our mission, we believe that you're not defined by your worst day. We believe that you can bounce forward to a joy-filled and fulfilling life that we call a life of significance, a life on purpose dedicated to serving others. And what's amazing to me is the founder of Beyond the Crucible, and in that sense, the team leader, is that our team is 100% committed to that vision. And at least I believe that they believe it's very much their vision as my vision. And I've said that to the team when we're in Savannah. That blesses me no end. I can't tell you how much that means to me. People don't say, well, I'm getting a paycheck and I'm getting paid. I have a contract. And yes, of course, if you respect people, you've got to obviously pay them for the contribution that they're making. But you want to feel like it's more than that they care about the mission. And I feel like that's true in our case. And that makes a massive difference for productivity in the team meeting. It's like this organization's important. Beyond the Crucible is important. So we've got to figure out how to take this team and this organization to the next level. Everybody comes in with that shared passion. That doesn't happen if people are feeling like, hey, I'm just phoning it in and whatever. I mean, who cares? I really could care less about this organization and its mission and vision. So it's absolutely critical. It's critical that you look for it as you're hiring people. It's critical that you look for it as you're having a team meeting. It's so important.
Yeah. And I think the thing from Savannah, the meeting that we're talking about, that really spotlighted the 100% commitment is we had homework before that meeting, right? There were like 15 questions, 16, 17 questions. Some of them, and that was a bit of a cheat because some of the questions were point A, point B, point C, list 3 or list 5, no more than 8. And every single member of the team, including you, right, filled out those homework sheets with intentionality. We all brought our best game forward, our best vision forward for what the next steps could be. And that was the secret sauce, if you will, of what made the meeting move so smoothly, is that we had given a lot of thought and not take, how many, it would have been easy to go, oh my gosh. And okay, I'll acknowledge when I opened it up and I saw 16 questions, I was like, man, I hope I have enough, I got to find time.
And these were not easy questions.
They weren't. These were deep thought questions. And it would have been easy for me to have seen that and just sort of shirked my duty and, fulfilled Yeah. Just put something underneath each one, but I didn't.
And looking at those questions, you knew this was not going to take 5 minutes.
Right.
This is going to take a long time. And
Correct.
It was productive and it was very helpful, but you knew, okay, this is going to require me to really think, and it's going to take me some time. I might have to do it in more than one sitting. I mean, but you're right. Everybody showed up and they put the work in. Clearly, they thought about it deeply and spent quite a bit of time on it. I mean, a lot of time. And you're right. That was a secret sauce, because as we're discussing things, people were prepared and they were eager to share.
Right.
They were eager to contribute. So yeah, it's a very good point, Gary, to point out. That was certainly a very tangible example of how committed people were to that team meeting and to the organization, even before the meeting began. It's a tremendous point. It was a great sign.
Yeah. And this is the perfect time in this conversation, Warwick, to talk about a member of the team who was not able to be with us in Savannah. He was not able to be with us in the photograph. Ironically, because she's a graphic designer, she could have inserted herself in the photograph and we would have not noticed that she wasn't there in Savannah with us. But that is Blair Rosen, who's the graphic designer who brings such excellence to both the things she designs for Beyond the Crucible, and she brought great insights to her homework as well, which really fueled our conversations when we were there. So I needed to give a shout out to Blair. You've talked a little bit about some things leaders can do to make this happen, this idea of building 100% commitment. But again, not everybody's going to be there, right? Their meter might be down a little lower. Let's talk a little more about that. How can a leader make this happen? What are some strings a leader can pull, levers they can push that can make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing as a leader is that you've got to create an environment where the team members feel it's a safe and secure environment. They've got to feel that they can be heard and be vulnerable. They've got to feel like their opinions matter and they'll be heard. As we often say here, and you often say, Gary, it doesn't mean that each person will, so to speak, win on an issue. I mean, you've used the phrase, very apt phrase, people, like on the teams you've led, you want to make sure people will be heard. It doesn't mean every person's opinion will be heeded. And that's a great phrase, heard as against heeded. So you want to feel like that, yeah, it doesn't mean that each person's going to win on any given issue, but they'll feel like individually and collectively that they're being heard, and that collectively they actually are shaping the future direction of the organization. So creating this environment of vulnerability and safety. You know, one of the things I often reflect on is if you're leading a team and over the course of months, years, if the reality is that you've never incorporated anybody's idea from your team ever on any initiative, there's no way people are going to feel heard. It's one thing to have your idea not win every time. It's another thing for nobody's idea to win. You know, nobody's idea to be heeded. That you cannot say that is good team leadership. You cannot say, oh, I hear you. No. At some point, hearing needs to translate into reality. At some point, collectively, what you come up with must include the contributions of your team. If you don't, either you're an arrogant team leader that shouldn't be there, or you've got the wrong people on the team that don't have the wrong expertise, or right. Clearly something's wrong. Clearly, Houston, we have a problem if nobody's opinion is ever getting heeded. So that's obviously, critical. And I guess another point is, how do you create this environment of safety and vulnerability? And I think there's a couple of things. You need to choose team members who'll create such an environment to the degree that they're secure within themselves. It's easier to be vulnerable. If you're sharing something, you're unsure about something. Hey, I made this mistake at a previous organization, and one of the things I learned about this is X. Well, the insecure person is thinking, all they will hear is, I made a mistake. The secure person will say, as I often say, it's vulnerability for a purpose. The reason I shared my mistake is because I learned something from that mistake. And therefore, I think moving forward, we should do Y, not X. So there's a reason behind that vulnerability. And so you want to have that climate. But I think the team leader also needs to model vulnerability. It needs to go out of their way to make individual team members feel heard. There's a lot of things I don't do well in, but one of my highest values is vulnerability, and vulnerability for a purpose. So it's not like I can't get insecure. We all can. I have my moments, but I do try to model this to the best degree I can. I try to make people feel heard. Doesn't mean I don't get touchy or impatient or sensitive, or I'll get triggered by something. We're all human. I'm human. I have my moments in which, maybe I'm not my best self, so to speak. But overall, we don't measure people by their bad moments, their touchy moments. Overall, do they model vulnerability? Overall, do they model listening to people? So really, the tone is set by the team leader. And secondarily, yes, the tone is set by the people you select on the team. But if you set the tone and you have got the right people, then there can be this spirit of safety and vulnerability, which encourages deep sharing. It encourages productivity. It encourages respectful, boy, I hear you, but I just have a different perspective. And the person who shared that won't push back. They'll say, okay, boy, that's interesting, Gary. Tell me more about that. They won't say, oh, Gary's challenging me. No, Gary's not challenging me. Gary's offering a different perspective. Let's dialogue about it. All of that happens because of the inner work. And all of that happens if you have people who are willing to be vulnerable, willing to be authentic, and the team leader models authenticity and models vulnerability.
Yeah. One of the, before we leave the subject of the fifth point in the blog, that each individual team member must have 100% commitment to the vision of the organization. I would add in Warwick, and Warwick might be embarrassed. Woo! One of the things that you do very well in helping build, in creating 100% commitment, is that you give the members of the team opportunity to achieve goals, objectives that grow the team's impact or mission, or in other words, you don't control all that. You're the one that has to do everything. You give people the chance to have wins. You give people the chance to execute on ideas. I'll raise my hand and say, you've had me write the blog a few times, usually around Christmas, usually me trying to find a movie that has great Crucible lessons about at Christmas time. That's my challenge every Christmas. But you're very good at giving people the opportunity to achieve in the context of the team. And I think that brings 100% commitment for sure.
Thank you for that, Gary. and I appreciate it. One of the things that makes me think is one of my other high ideals, something I feel very strongly about, is obviously Beyond the Crucible came out of my experience, as listeners know, of growing up in a 150-year-old family media business, losing it in a failed $2.25 billion takeover. And obviously there's the whole backstory, and a lot of it's in my book, Crucible Leadership. But the reason I say that is it's very personal, this mission.
Right.
It's extremely personal. I feel so committed to it. So it could be understandable if it's like, don't tinker with my vision. As I say in my book, I give an example about, Michelangelo's statue of David, which is in Florence. And it can feel like giving people a chisel and say, look, I think I've come up with a good starting point, but here's a chisel, see if you can improve the vision. It's like, it's Michelangelo's statue of David. Don't desecrate it. Don't even breathe near it. You, as a founder of a leader of an organization or a team, you could feel that way. And obviously I'm passionate about what we do at Beyond the Crucible. Clearly it's very personal to me, but it's my conviction that Beyond the Crucible needs to be as much our vision as my vision. It's not just my vision. It needs to be our vision. We all need to be committed. And if somebody can figure out a way to make it better, refine it over time in the last year, we as a team, and in this case led by Cheryl, said, I think we're becoming less of a leadership brand, less of Crucible leadership, given the guests we have on the podcast and the things that I write about in blogs and speak about. We're becoming more of a personal development, self-improvement brand beyond the Crucible. Now, I didn't say, yep, makes sense in 1 millisecond. It's like it's a massive change, so I had to think about it. But I knew there was the ring of truth in there. I knew it made sense. So I didn't say yes immediately. You'd be foolish to say yes immediately to a significant change in a brand and direction of an organization. But I listened and like, this makes sense. And everybody on the team said, you know what, Cheryl, this makes sense. You're right. And so we collectively have moved and are moving in that direction. So you want people to feel committed to your vision. You've got to feel like it's not just your vision. You've got to allow everybody to own the vision as much as you do.
Yeah. And that will end our discussion of point 5 in the blog. Let's revisit the first 5 points that we've talked about on how to build a great team. First one is pick the right individual team members. Second one is choose team members who are secure within themselves. Third point, have team members who are respectful. Fourth is team members must be authentic and humble. And we've just finished talking about point 5. Each individual team member must be 100% committed to the vision of the organization. We've got a couple of more points left. Warwick, the 6th point, I hesitate to say this is the most important one, but the 6th point to me in my leadership experience, my team building experience has been extraordinarily important. And that's this, have team members who have differences. Why? Some people would say, well, that seems counterintuitive maybe. Is that really the best practice? Why is that the best practice when you're building a team?
There are two opposing ideas in one sense that are not really opposing. You want to have unity, certainly amongst the vision and mission of the organization, but you also want to have differences. And by that, I mean differences in personality, background, experience, because that will offer differences in perspective. And differences in perspective can create something that's much greater than you had to start with. So it's easy to have everybody with the same personality, a whole bunch of introverts or extroverts, people with exactly the same background, which it's funny. I tend not to have a trouble finding people with different backgrounds than me. You know, who knew?
Yeah. Huh.
I can't remember the last team meeting of former media moguls that I've been in.
Right.
You know, doesn't come to mind. So I don't really have that challenge myself of finding people that are different than myself, but it's in the differences between people and their backgrounds and personalities and views of where you can have tremendous productivity.
Yeah. And this point is so important to me because in my career, I've hired scores of people, and I can honestly say I've never hired someone who was like me. Yeah, maybe add little, hey, someone's bald. Okay, that's different. Whose experience and profile and temperament and all those things were exactly like me, because I don't need two me's on a team, right? Because what happens in a team, I've always been a proponent of this. The great thing about having the opportunity to fill a vacancy on your team is that you have the opportunity to change the alchemy of that team. And I always look at how can we trade up with the skills and the experience that we get, the perspectives that we get, and then that will change the alchemy of the team. And when the alchemy changes, from my perspective, in my experience, that's a chance to really grow footprint, impact, vision, all of those things.
That's so important. Just to almost play Gary here. Listeners, I want you to pay attention to what Gary just said. Hear these words. I don't need two me's on a team. That is one of the most profound things you are going to hear. Those are words to live by. I don't need two me's on a team. It might sound obvious, but it's often rare that people will actually do that. So think of that phrase, emblazon that phrase in your memory, because those are profound words. So don't forget them.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I'll just before we get off this point, I'll say, if you've listened to this podcast a few times or all of them, you can tell that Warwick did not bring in as his co-host someone who's exactly like him as the host. We definitely have differences. One of the things I loved about Savannah is that we did a photo shoot for individuals and for us as co-host and host of the show. And in those photos, you can see the differences between the two of us. You can see definitely a bond between the two of us, but you can also see that we're not the same person. And I think that comes through, and I think that it makes the show stronger in my...
Yeah, you didn't grow up in Sydney. I didn't grow up in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
And I'm so bad at math that I probably couldn't do math that involved billions. So we're definitely in a different place. All right, let's land the plane here, Warwick, on this discussion of your blog, How to Build a Great Team, and go to point 7. And this again is just critical. And that point is this, point 7 in the blog: team members must genuinely care for each other. I know you to be a careful writer. I know that every word in that sentence was chosen for a purpose, and genuine is what sticks out for me. Genuinely care for each other. Why is that? Because that's the one point in here that doesn't maybe necessarily seem exactly like a business, a work team, right? It's not an aspect. Genuinely caring for each other is not something that shows up in the ledger necessarily, but it does in some way. So explain why that point is so important to you that you closed your blog with.
Yeah, Gary, I mean, it's an interesting question, because you can ask, well, why does it matter if we care for each other? We're here to get a job done. Even in a nonprofit, whether we like each other, does that matter so long as we're achieving the objectives of the organization, and helping other people, But I think it does matter. I mean, to have a team where you care for each other, I feel like you want to care for the whole person. It's not like, well, I don't really care about what's happening with your family and challenges at home, illnesses, or just beyond just challenges at home, just, people's backgrounds, their interests, their hobbies, things they love, experiences they've had, places they've been, just getting to know each other. We should want to do it because we should genuinely want to care for and know the people who we are around. Now, we can't know and care for everybody on the planet, people we've never met. But my gosh, the people, certainly in our families, the people that we work with, we spend a lot of time with them, hours every day often. We accumulate huge amounts of time. You should want to know and care for those that you work with. Now, there is a byproduct. It's not the reason you should do it. You should want to do it because you should genuinely want to care for those who are around you. But the byproduct is, if you do that, people will feel cared for. They'll feel safe, secure. They'll feel this is more than just trotting out widgets in this organization. This is an organization where they actually care for me as a whole person, and they'll want to be more productive. They'll want to feel more committed to the mission of the organization. But it's not a trick. People are smart. If they feel like the only reason you're asking questions about their family is because you're phoning it in, just because you read it in a book, that you should care for your team, that will do a lot of damage. It'll be so transparent, your lack of transparency, if you will, that you can't fake that stuff. You can't fake care. You can't trot out like questions on a 3x5 card. How's your wife? How's your husband? How's your kids? How's your parents? How's you? What hobbies did you do? Okay, great. There's got to be a list of other questions I can ask. I mean, come on. It'll never work. It'll never work. So you should want to care for those around you and those on your team just because they're human beings you interact with. But there will be a byproduct that will forge greater relationships and more productivity for the team. Again, I can't say it enough. That can't be why you do it, but it will certainly create an atmosphere where there'll be more commitment and more will get done. But again, that's not the reason for it, but there is a byproduct. You should want to do it anyway, but it will certainly help increase team spirit and team productivity, no question.
Yeah. And you know what I noticed from Savannah that spotlights this, and it's something that I don't know if anybody else noticed. I noticed it happen over those 3 days. We each did little things for each other, whether that's, I'm getting up, throw away my lunch garbage. May I take yours? There's, I've got to move something to my car. Hey, can I help you do that? It's those little things that don't get noticed. They're not big, they're not grandiose, but they're those little things that say, not like care about you, which is critical, but also I'm here to help you. I'm here to go back to the second point. You have to be secure within yourself, right? You have to be respectful. You have to be authentic and humble. And I'm not too big, right? We're not too big to pick up your garbage and throw it away to help you out so you can continue, however that works. I just noticed little kindnesses, little niceties that were genuine, that weren't, that didn't show up on the whiteboards that we were writing on, but it was something that I took away with. I think that's a critical part of that caring about each other, is looking out for each other in the ways that you can look out for each other.
Yeah, it's so true. And one of the things that I reflected on most from our time, obviously I'm thinking about, gosh, that was so productive. We got all these great ideas and brand dimensions and how we pivot even more from Crucible leadership, a leadership brand, to more self-improvement, self-development beyond the Crucible and all the things we're going to do. Obviously that was exciting, but it was just the commitment to each other, the caring. And, obviously when you're at these team meetings, you'll have time where at lunch or at dinner, you spend a lot of time together. The vulnerability and the sharing in what would be seen by many as a workplace meeting, which it was, and we're friends, but we work together. It was incredible. People were sharing stories about their childhood and family challenges at an incredibly deep level. I mean, it's hard to think it could have been any deeper. And like all great conversations, it moves in and out from laughter and funny anecdotes and stories to deep and meaningful tragedies that happened. And it just flows in and out. And that just staggered me as I reflect, because that is highly unusual in a work setting to share that deeply about some really painful things that each of us had gone through. So to me, that doesn't happen without a sense of security, of vulnerability, and where you feel the other person genuinely cares for you. You don't share some of your innermost worst days with people if you don't feel cared for, or that's a safe place where you can be vulnerable. It blessed me no end. It amazed me. Maybe amazed isn't the right word, but it just, because I knew the team we have.
Right.
So obviously, I guess it could happen, but it put it this way, it blessed me the fact that people would feel that they could share that openly with each other. That to me was one of the highlights of the whole time in Savannah, the downtime when we were sharing so openly with ourselves. I mean, it was amazing, wonderful. It was incredible. It was hard to put into words, but it meant so much to me.
And this will surprise you, folks. This will surprise you. What Warwick just said, I have it written down here on my paper, the next question I'm going to ask him. And he just teed it up like the Masters tournament. It's just teed up. And that's this. You write in the blog, Warwick, and it was a word, again, you don't choose words like, you wrote this in the blog, that coming away from that meeting in Savannah, that you felt grateful. That's the word you used, grateful for what had occurred there. Not even so much, right, for what was accomplished there. That's important, but you expressed your gratitude about what had occurred there among the team. So I will finish my questioning of you here to ask, why did you come away from the meeting feeling so grateful?
I came away feeling so blessed. I mean, we had a team of motivated individuals who cared as much about the mission of Beyond the Crucible as I did. I mean, that's an amazing statement to say. Again, we talk about, one of the core elements of that mission is that your worst day doesn't define you. There is hope. You can lead a life of significance. You can come back. You can bounce forward. You can lead lives of purpose, and lives where you focus on others. The fact that everybody was 100% committed to that, how can we take this to the next level? How can we impact more people? I mean, yes, we focus on revenue targets and all of that, but what we're all more focused on is how do we create impact? And part of, obviously, impact, can lead to revenue, obviously, but we're focused on impact. That is the most important thing that we're trying to achieve. And the fact that we had people with diverse backgrounds, personalities, and skills, they knew who they were and who they were not. Everybody was respectful of each other. People didn't feel the need to dominate or, win, so to speak, on any given discussion. People were humble and authentic. I mean, it led to such rich and amazing and productive conversations. And just emblematic of this time of people feeling safe and secure and vulnerable was the level of vulnerability and sharing, as I just mentioned, in the so-called downtimes and the lunches and dinners. It was amazing. Having such a great team and a great team meeting, it's not easy, but it's possible. Obviously, it starts with having the right team members. Obviously, it requires a team leader that tries to model an environment of respect and vulnerability and compassion. You need people to feel that they matter and that the mission of the organization matters. If you put people first and respect them, create this environment of vulnerability and shared 100% commitment to the vision of the organization, it is possible to have very productive meetings, but more than that, to have meetings in which everybody that comes there feels so blessed to have been there. Isn't that the kind of team meeting we all want? We feel like, gosh, I'm so glad I was there, and I feel so blessed that I'm part of this organization. I feel like we got great things done, but I feel blessed to be part of a team like this. That's the kind of team we all want to create. That's the kind of team I think that we all want to be on.
Yeah. And it's also the kind of team, folks, let's not lose sight of this. Warwick said at the outset, the purpose of this meeting in Savannah was to plan the future things that Beyond the Crucible is going to do over the next 12 to 18 months. I encourage you, keep your eyes on, keep your ears open, because you'll see what those things are. And the work product of those meetings, in addition to the interaction of those meetings, was very good. And you will see over the next 12 to 18 months, keep watching, keep listening, because you'll see some pretty exciting things on the horizon, which that horizon will get closer over the next 12 to 18 months. Before I go into the reflection questions, one last shout out to the team members we've been talking about. There's Blair Rosen, there's Margaret Hibbard, and there's Cheryl Farr, all of whom embody all these things that Warwick has been talking about here in this discussion. So the reflection questions, and Warwick wrote these reflection question, folks. And if you've heard one of these episodes before, where we talk about the blog, there are reflection questions, and sometimes it's like it's just like one sentence. Warwick went deeper here because this issue requires deeper reflection because it benefits from deeper reflection. So here's 3 points of reflection that you can take away from this conversation and use this reflection to help you build your own best team. The first point is, do I have the right team? First question to ask yourself. Team members with different skills who know who they are and respect each other. If not, what would be the first step to finding team members who are qualified, but also respectful of each other? That's reflection point 1. Reflection point 2 is, how can I model as a team leader the kind of behavior I'm looking for in them? Perhaps I can show vulnerability and go out of my way to show the individual team members that their opinion and their contributions matter. Second reflection question. Third reflection question. The most involved of all, and this is a great place to land because there's some deep thoughts you could put to this, and that's this. How can I show the team that the vision and mission of the organization is not just my vision and mission, but theirs as well? Perhaps I can ask team members what they think of the vision and mission of the organization. Why does it matter? Who does the organization help and serve? How can we take the organization to the next level to care for and benefit even more people? As I said before, I started reading those reflection points. That's the work product that came out of our meeting in Savannah that you're going to hear more about as we go forward. And we are going to go forward now, folks. So remember, until we're together the next time, that your Crucible experiences do not in any way, shape, or form define you. They're not the end of your story. In fact, they're the beginning of a new story that can lead to a fabulous story that ends in a fabulous place, and the place that it ends is a life of significance.
If you enjoyed this episode, learned something from it, we invite you to engage more deeply with those of us at Beyond the Crucible. Visit our website, beyondthecrucible.com, to explore a plethora of offerings to help you transform what's been broken into breakthrough. A great place to start? Our free online assessment, which will help you pinpoint where you are on your journey beyond your crucible and to chart a course forward. See you next week.